Muchas gracias por esa presentación. Ahora vamos a cambiar al inglés porque tenemos un invitado de lujo hoy día aquí, por supuesto, en la red de recursos humanos. Hi, Gary, how are you?
Great. Wonderful to be back in Chile with you.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have you for the second time here in Chile. And well, maybe I want to tell everyone how we met some years
Please.
ago on the year 2018. We were at a Singularity Summit here, organized by Barbara Silva. And we were in the same panel, do you remember? Yeah,
absolutely.
talking about future of leadership, I think it was.
Correct.
Leadership and future of work, of course. And we stay in touch. You contacted me also during the pandemic, and we made an interview. Can you please tell about what event was that?
So during the pandemic, we realized that many people were feeling disconnected. They weren't really thinking as much about their futures and future careers. They were very focused on the challenges of a global pandemic. And so our managing partner, Heidi Kleinmaus, and I produced an event called Global Skills Day to bring attention to the idea of human skills around the world. And you were an amazing speaker and had offered great perspective.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It was a virtual interview. I remember you had a lot of speakers all over the world. And last year, I decided to write a book. And I was thinking about who can make the foreword of my book about employment and future of work. And I got this fixed idea, it must be Gary. And I wrote to you, and you were so generous, so you agree. And this is my book, and the foreword is written by you. So thank you very much for that.
Well, it's a great privilege for me.
Yeah, okay. And talking about books, there are two books that have been very important in your life, Gary. I want to show, this is the first book. What color is your parachute?
Yes.
Here it's a year 2018 because there's a new book, a new version of this book every year, and I want you to tell the history about this book. And also there's the next rules of work, your book that you launched during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Can you please tell us the story about these books?
So the first book, What Color is Your Parachute, was written by my father, who was a former priest, who became the world's career counselor. And he ended up writing a book that he updated every year for 42 years, starting with 1970. But it was always about the techniques for career change and job search decision-making that were working for people, that were most effective for people. And I had the privilege of being trained in his methods when I was a 19-year-old. But I found what I loved to do was technology. So I grew up in Silicon Valley. I worked in companies starting in 1984. But before my father passed away, I returned to that arena in helping him to start a company, a software company, to take his work online. And what I realized was that there's just a tremendous opportunity. My father was always focused on helping individuals to be able to go through career change. I wanted to change the system. I wanted organizations, I wanted governments, I wanted schools to think very, very differently about how we work and how we learn. And so that was really my focus in my book, The Next Rules of Work, which I began to write just as the global pandemic was beginning. And so I was able to take advantage of the insights that we had been talking about for years about how what we call exponential technologies were affecting work, and then the strategies for each of us to be able to navigate a world of exponential change.
Yeah. Can you please tell us about your book and the main idea that you have in your book, The Next Rules of Work?
The most important takeaways I want people to have is that I believe that change is continuous. It's not going to slow down. Today, it's what I call the AI tsunami of artificial intelligence software. Tomorrow, it could be a variety of new ways to be able to compute. But because those changes will continue to come, each of us needs strategies for being able to continually navigate a world of change. And so I talk about what I call the three legs of the stool: mindset, skill set, and tool set. And it's important for each of us to be able to develop the most effective mindset, to be able to continue to develop a 21st century skill set, and then to be able to leverage these new tools of techniques and technologies that are continually coming in to be able to do our best work.
And regarding those three concepts, which one is the most important?
As I'm fond of saying, we all need that 21st century skill set, and I'm happy to talk about that. But mindset eats skill set for lunch. Each of us has a range of mindsets that we have, that we develop as we grow and change. And what is very important is for us to adopt the kind of mindsets that can be most effective at helping us to be able to change. Dr. Carol Dweck in her book Mindset talks about growth. So it's very important we each see ourselves as having a growth mindset and continually learning and changing. And then there's an amazing woman who's a wonderful executive coach named Crystal Fernando that I partner with. And she talks about a flexible mindset where we are continually encountering new problems we might never have encountered before. And we're able to flexibly solve those problems.
And I am thinking about myself when I grew up. My parents and maybe, I don't know, the society told me that my mission was to go to the university to study a career, and that career and that diploma was going to be enough to work for the next 40 years. This is old school, of course, but how we can talk to these generations that have heard this for decades, and now it's different, the landscape.
So the mindset of our parents and our grandparents was often that you would go to school and then you would learn a vocation or you would learn a trade. And in the old rules of work, in a previous era, that actually probably worked pretty well for many people because you could take that early learning and you could amortize that investment throughout your time in the world of work. You might be a doctor, you might be a lawyer, you might be an engineer working for decades in the same field. But in a world of exponential change, and especially where technology is transforming so much work, we need to help young people, especially, to have a different mindset. What I often encourage educators, parents, young people, is to not think so much about what is the investment I must make today to be able to have a job in 50 years. None of us can predict that far down the road. Instead, what do you want to focus on next? What is the next step in your world, in the world of work, where that you want to focus on to develop the skill set, the mindset to solve certain kinds of problems? And then you might pivot, as startups do, in a few years, in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and change to something very, very different. But you must learn as early as possible what that process of determining what to do next is, and then being able to achieve your goals.
And how we can become effective lifelong learners. It's a 70-20-10, a good method. What do you think about this?
So everybody has, I think, different mindsets about what learning is and how to learn, and we each have different motivations. So 70-20-10 is a good approach for many people. What I often suggest is the data is very good to show the kinds of people, the kinds of mindsets that people have that help them to continuously learn. And so some of these ingredients are what I call a Southern Cross or a North Star. When sailors used to navigate the seas, they would look to the stars, and the stars never got them to exactly the place they were heading, just generally in the right direction. So what is that magnet for you? What is that magnet for anybody that is watching the video? What pulls you forward? And if you don't know what that is, that's the first problem to solve. If you do know what that is, then what is it that helps you to really feed your curiosity, to want to learn more about that arena, to want to continually develop the skill set to be as effective as you can be in that arena? And if that's the mindset that you bring, then you will always have what Dr. Dweck calls the growth mindset, in that you'll always be thinking about the next thing that you're curious about or that you want to learn.
Okay. No, great. And how this changes the role of universities and institutes. Are they really getting the right rhythm on this, on how to change and how to maybe to adapt the way that they are teaching?
So I just did a talk for Universidad de Santo Tomas, and I lectured to many universities around the world. And so I want to point to this great strengths that many universities bring, which is that they have created institutions that help to impart bodies of knowledge to people in a reasonably effective manner. The challenge is that the shelf life of that information, how long that information might be useful in different fields, is shortening very rapidly. So what it creates is a lot of opportunity for colleges and universities to rethink what their mission is. If your mission is not to try to put so much information into the heads of your learners that they could use for the next 50 years, but instead is to teach them a flexible skill set so they become infected with the love of learning. They want to continue to learn. They can learn what they need to do the next step in their work or their careers. That's a tremendous deliverable for those institutions. Many of them are still designed, though, for the old rules of work. And so that's an opportunity for them to go through their own transformation, to become more flexible platforms for learning.
You talk a lot about the old rules of work and the new rules of work. Can you explain this concept?
So work has always changed. And if you picture waves of change, right? So many of us still follow the old rules of work. And those rules, nobody told you that they were rules, but we still follow them. 5 days a week, 9 to 5 jobs. The whole concept of a 5-day-a-week work week actually came from a factory in the northeastern US 100 years ago that wanted both Jewish and Christian workers to have the same days off. And that infected the world. Yet we don't even question, why is it 5 days? Why can't it be 4 days? As many companies are starting to experiment with. So those old rules still color a lot of our practices and our thinking. There's always new rules, and we experimented a little bit with more flexible work before the pandemic. And then a pandemic comes along, and suddenly we are co-creating what I call the next rules. And that's really where I want to encourage people to have the mindset is, what is the next phase? What are we preparing ourselves for? And especially, what are young people looking for? I often say, I don't think it's a new generation. I think it's a new species that has completely different motivations. And how can young people especially feel that they are co-creating the next rules of work together in the organizations where they work?
Yeah. Also, we see now that the new generations, this new species, they want different things from work. And we were talking before about the case of Australia. Can you maybe share about what's happening there, how you can manage this mismatch between what you need to hire and what you find?
Yes, absolutely. So what's common, especially in a post-pandemic world, is that many countries around the world have, as you say, a mismatch. There's a demand of the jobs that need to be filled, and there's the supply. That's us humans who are messy and expensive. And so, so we try to match those things up when we help governments, for instance, to think differently about their workforces. And the challenge, of course, is that the old rules don't necessarily apply anymore. So you look at a variety of industries where it's being more and more challenging to find the workers. We talk a lot about hospitality, for instance, in hotels and restaurants. A lot of those jobs early on, like washing dishes and sometimes waiting the tables, it's not the most fun. But in the old rules of work, if those were the only jobs that were available, then many young people would simply say, well, that's how I'll start. And I'll eventually, hopefully, be able to do other kinds of work. However, what's happening in a post-pandemic world is the mismatches are growing in many cases. There's many different industries in the US, which is short about 300,000 construction workers. We don't know how to fill those gaps because there are many pathways for jobs, for work, for careers that traditionally people used to follow. And now young people want to follow different pathways. they have more of what we often call optionality. They have more options in the things that they can do. They can find out about driving for Uber. They can find out about startups their friends are working on. They can find about alternative jobs. And if they don't like the job that they're working on today, they often have more options than previous generations did. And that means new strategies for how people run organizations and how they try to co-create the rules of work to be able to attract young people and make them want to stay.
Okay, great. And there's also about the old rules and the new rules about having one employer and this full-time contract. And what's happening now? Do we have other options instead of full-time employees?
So first off, there will always be traditional jobs, one person, one job, and it might be a 9-to-5 job, and it might be 5 days a week. There will always be traditional, I call them use cases for work. However, what happens in a world of exponential change, where technologies and world events are constantly changing the rules around us, we need to have more flexible mindsets about what work is and what jobs are. So think about the kinds of things that many people like to do. We like to solve problems. We like to have variety. We like to solve different kinds of problems at different points. We like to make sure that we're continually able to feed our curiosity. All of those require a different operating system for the organization. So where you might have had lots of traditional jobs in a strict hierarchy, in silos, instead to be thinking much more flexibly as a connection of workers doing projects, solving different kinds of problems, and maybe working on multiple projects simultaneously, maybe being on simultaneous different teams. And how would an organization actually do that? How would it manage that operating system to be able to provide that kind of flexible work? That's the real opportunity for organizations and for the people who lead organizations going forward, is to build much more flexible structures that allow people to be able to focus on different kinds of problems, and then to continually have that change over time to keep people fascinated and engaged in their work.
No, that's really... Do you like to call that the gig economy, or what's the name that you use for that?
So good question. So I often say that the future of the organization is not a workforce, and it's not a network, but it's a work net. It's a group of humans that all have different skills, different problem-solving capacity, and they're continually being placed in environments or being able to create environments where they can come together in teams and solve those problems. So if you picture a network of people and you picture a range of problems for them to solve, you can think of this constantly changing landscape. I often say one simple word for that is community. Think of it as what happens in communities. People come together to solve problems all the time. And so organizations will look more and more like that community fabric, that work net of people solving problems together.
We share one thing in common, that we are both instructors for LinkedIn Learning in English and Spanish. And that's a new way on how to teach with videos. It's an asynchronic way of having courses. And let's talk about future of education. Can you please tell a case of good practices in companies about how they have a culture of learning inside their organizations and teams?
So back in 2010, our managing partner, Heidi Kleinmaus, produced an event focused on the future of higher education. And then I wrote a series of articles, including one on Medium called Unbundling Higher Education. And my premise was that our institutions of learning, which are often sort of in silos, that the real future was going to be unbundling, not having all of them in these silos and structured together, but instead having learning be much more atomic and much more focused on just-in-time and just-in-context learning in the context of solving problems. And so there are organizations that have actually embraced that kind of mindset and then have built that operating system for people to be able to continuously learn. And my favorite example is Novartis, which is the 100,000 person pharma company. And they have a process of continuous learning where everybody must have a learning path, from the people that were just hired to the CEO. And they talk about their learning paths all the time. And the company once a year has what it calls Curiosity Month, where each of the workers teaches mini courses to the others. Could be in the context of their work, or it could be about cooking, or it could be about taking care of animals, or something that is a passion for them, so that they can all exhibit their curiosity to each other and help feed each other's curiosity so that they can learn together as an organization.
That's a network. And everyone is a trainer. Everyone is a learner,
Everyone's a learner,
everyone is a
everyone's a teacher. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and this is, again, an opportunity for educators in existing educational systems, is to be thinking about how do we encourage our learners to also become the ones who teach. One of my favorite books is Esther Wojcicki's Moonshots in Education. And her whole premise as a teacher, a very popular teacher in Palo Alto, California, was to have the students teach each other. And so the whole process of trying to figure out how to scale classrooms and how to deal with the challenges of learners who might be not as quickly picking things up is to help the students themselves to be able to encourage the learning of others.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like the flipped classroom model.
Exactly. Yeah.
The teacher, it's not the teacher, everyone is a teacher.
They're not the sage on the stage, they're the guide on the side.
Yeah, interesting. And last question, Gary. If you can give one advice to companies about how they can install this culture of learning, how they can start doing this?
So it's really important that organizations have a thesis. That is, they have some statement of their values, or the things that matter the most to them. And it's critical that lifelong learning and encouraging everybody throughout the entire organization to learn is deeply installed in those values, in that statement of who the organization is and what it wants to do. Second is that the organization has to make a commitment to continually investing in the learning of everyone throughout the entire organization, and seeing that as an investment in their future so that they will continue to grow. And then the third is, when they hire new people in, and especially young people, that new species, it's very, very important to make the commitment that you will help them to learn what they need to be effective in their work. In the old rules of work, we thought that maybe the university was going to give them a degree and everything would be, all the knowledge would be filled in.
Full.
Not going to happen. It's not going to be the future. It's going to be much more. People are going to come to solve new problems. We must continually train them. And so organizations need to make that commitment and that investment for continuous, never-ending, lifelong learning.
Okay. Thank you, Gary, for this wonderful conversation. And we hope to have you again here in Chile.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.